I watched the boarding gate close from my plastic chair in the terminal, my phone still clutched in my trembling hand. The screen showed the same thing it had for the past 45 minutes. No new messages. The flight to Paris, the family vacation I'd saved 3 years of my meager salary to help pay for, had just departed. Without me. My mother knew I was stuck in the security line. I'd called her twice, texted her 7 times, even messaged my sister Emma, begging them to wait just 10 more minutes. The TSA had flagged my bag for a random check. Not my fault, not something I could control, but the plane left anyway, and in this life I knew exactly why. My phone buzzed. Finally, my heart leaped. Maybe they'd realized their mistake. Maybe they'd rebooked me on the next flight. Maybe... Emma. Sorry, sis. Mom said we couldn't delay everyone else's vacation for your bad planning. We'll send pics. Don't forget to lock up the house when you get home. XOXO. The same words. Exactly the same words as the first time I'd lived through this day. I was 28 years old, sitting in JFK International Airport, and I was living my life for the second time. 3 weeks ago, I died at age 33, a brain aneurysm, sudden and catastrophic, and woken up in my bed on my 28th birthday, 5 years in the past, with every memory of those 5 years perfectly intact, including this day. The day that had started my unraveling the first time around. The first time I lived this moment, I'd cried. I'd maxed out my credit card to buy a new ticket for the next available flight. I'd arrived in Paris 2 days late, exhausted and broke, only to be told by my family that I'd ruined the energy of the trip. My mother had made me sleep on the pull-out couch in the hotel's living room as punishment. Emma had accidentally spilled wine on my only nice dress. My father had spent the entire week telling strangers that I was always so disorganized, such a burden. That trip had broken something in me. I'd spent the next 5 years trying desperately to prove I was worthy of my family's love, working myself to exhaustion, giving them money I couldn't afford to give, shrinking myself smaller and smaller until there was almost nothing left, until my brain had quite literally exploded from the stress. But now I was back, and this time I wasn't going to Paris. I stood up from the chair, my legs steady, and walked to the airport's business center. I had work to do, to understand why being abandoned at JFK was actually a blessing. You need to understand the Whitmore family dynamics, or rather, the dysfunction that my family had perfected over 28 years. I was the oldest of 3 children, born to Margaret and David Whitmore in their small Brooklyn apartment when they were 22 and still deeply in love. I've seen the photos, my mother gazing at me with wonder, my father's face split in a genuine smile. For about 3 years, I was their miracle. Then Emma was born. Emma was beautiful in a way that I was not. I had our father's strong features, his dark hair, his height. Emma had our mother's delicate bone structure, blonde hair that caught the light, enormous blue eyes. By the time she could walk, modeling agencies were approaching my mother in grocery stores. By the time she was 5, she was booking commercials. The money from Emma's modeling paid for our move to the Manhattan apartment. It paid for her private school. It paid for our mother to quit her job and become Emma's full-time manager. And I became invisible. No, worse than invisible. I became the help. My father worked in finance, pulling long hours, emotionally checked out from family life unless Emma had a big booking to celebrate. My mother's entire existence revolved around Emma's career, and my younger brother Marcus, born when I was 7, seemed to sense instinctively that aligning himself with Emma was the path to parental approval. I was the one who made breakfast while Emma slept in before photo shoots. I did the laundry, cleaned the apartment, helped Marcus with homework. When I was 12, I used my babysitting money to buy my own school supplies because my mother forgot to get them. By 14, I was working part-time after school to pay for my own clothes, my own food when the family went out to dinner without me, which was often. Emma needs her rest, my mother would say, finding me scrubbing dishes at midnight. Don't be so loud, Head. You'll wake your sister. Why can't you be more supportive? My father would ask when I dared to look tired. Emma's success benefits all of us. But Emma's success never benefited me. When she landed a major campaign at 16 that paid enough to buy our family a summer house in the Hamptons, I wasn't invited for the celebratory weekend. I was 17 and I spent that weekend alone in the apartment studying for my SATs, eating ramen because they'd forgotten to leave me grocery money. I got into Columbia on a full academic scholarship. My mother missed my high school graduation because Emma had a casting call. My father took me to dinner afterward, just the two of us, the only time I remember having his full attention, and told me he was proud. Then he asked if I could defer my admission for a year to help more with the family. Emma was landing bigger jobs, and they needed someone to manage the household. I should have said no, I should have run, but I was 18 and desperate for crumbs of approval, so I deferred. Then they convinced me to go to a local CUNY school instead because Columbia is so far and we need you close by. I commuted from home, worked 2 jobs, and somehow still managed to graduate with honors. Not that anyone came to that graduation either. By my mid-20s, I'd settled into my role as the family workhorse. I had a decent job as a technical writer at a small publishing company. I paid my parents rent to live in Staninzaz, the smallest bedroom of the apartment I'd grown up in. I still did most of the cleaning, most of the cooking. Emma was 23, her modeling career transitioning into influencer territory with millions of followers. Marcus was 21, coasting through NYU on my parents' dime, directionless but beloved. And I was the responsible one. The boring one. The one they could always count on to handle the unglamorous necessities of life. Which is why, when my father announced the family vacation to Paris, a celebration of Emma landing a brand deal with a French fashion house, it never occurred to me that I wouldn't be included. Yes, I'd had to chip in $3,000 for my own ticket and expenses. Yes, I'd had to take unpaid leave from work because my vacation days were already spent covering for Emma's emergencies. Yes, I was sharing a hotel room with Emma while Marcus got his own room, but I was going. I was going to be part of the family, finally, on this beautiful trip to Paris. The first time I lived this day, I believed that. I believed that the security delay was just bad luck. I believed my mother when she later said she'd felt terrible, but couldn't make everyone else suffer. I believed Emma when she said the texts must not have gone through properly. I believed in my family. But then, in those 5 years after Paris, I'd learned the truth through 1,000 tiny cuts. I learned it when Emma borrowed my laptop for a presentation and never returned it, claiming it was lost. I later found it in her closet, wiped clean after she'd stolen all my personal writing from it, short stories I'd been working on for years. She published them on her blog under her own name. When I confronted her, my mother accused me of jealousy. I learned it when my parents asked to borrow $10,000 for an emergency home repair. I drained my savings account. 2 weeks later, I saw photos of Emma's birthday party on a yacht they'd rented. $20,000, easily. When I asked about it, my father said I was being petty and small-minded about how they spent their money. I learned it when I was offered a promotion that required relocating to Boston. My dream job, managing editor, nearly double my salary. My mother cried and said I was abandoning the family. Emma said I was selfish. My father said if I took the job, I wasn't welcome home for holidays. I turned it down and watched them vacation in Bali 2 months later, without me. I learned it on my 33rd birthday, the day I died. I'd spent the morning alone in my room, still the smallest room, still paying rent, when I overheard my parents and Emma in the kitchen. "We should just ask her to move out," Emma had said, "Man, she's so miserable all the time, it's bringing down the energy of the apartment. Plus, I want to turn her room into a closet." "She does pay rent, though," my father had replied. It's useful." "Barely anything," my mother had added, but yes, it's convenient. Let's keep her for now." Something in my chest had felt tight hearing those words, a sharp pain behind my eyes, and then nothing. I woke up 5 years earlier on my 28th birthday with all of those memories, all of that knowledge, and an absolute certainty that I was done being their workhorse, their afterthought, their useful disappointment. The business center at JFK was quiet, expensive, and exactly what I needed. I paid for 2 hours with my credit card, the same card I'd maxed out on a Paris ticket the first time around, and settled in at a private workstation. First, I logged into my bank account. I had $14,000 in savings. The first time through, I'd spent $3,000 on this Paris trip and $2,800 on a last-minute replacement ticket. This time, that money was staying exactly where it was. Second, I opened my email and found the message I was looking for, the one from 6 months ago that I'd completely forgotten about in my first life. It was from a genealogy website, one of those DNA testing companies I'd used on a whim during a particularly lonely weekend. Subject, DNA relative match. First cousin. I remembered doing the test. I didn't remember ever getting significant results. The first time around, I'd probably been too busy with Emma's latest crisis to check thoroughly, but now I read carefully. You have a new close relative match. Catherine Chen. Predicted relationship, first cousin, 12.5% DNA shared. Catherine has opted to share her family tree and contact information. Would you like to reach out? I clicked through to Catherine's profile. She was 57, lived in San Francisco, and her family tree showed her mother as Helen Whitmore, my father's older sister, the aunt I'd never met, the one whose name was never spoken in our house. My fingers flew across the keyboard. In my first life, I died without curiosity, without questions, accepting my family's narrative that we were all we had. But I'd also died with the vague knowledge that my father had a sister who'd been cut off from the family long before I was born. Some kind of argument with my grandparents? I composed an email to Catherine, introducing myself as David Whitmore's daughter, asking if she'd be willing to connect. Then I sat back and waited, drumming my fingers on the desk. While I waited, I made my second move. I logged into the publishing company's HR portal and opened the document I'd been too scared to open the first time. The Boston job offer. It had been sent to me 8 months ago in this timeline, 4 months before I'd eventually be offered it officially. This was the preliminary feeler, the soft inquiry to see if I'd be interested before they went through the formal process. The first time, I'd deleted it without responding, afraid of my family's reaction, afraid of being alone. This time, I wrote back expressing enthusiastic interest and asking to schedule a call. Third move, I opened my laptop, the one that in the first timeline Emma would steal in 3 months, and backed up all my files to 3 separate cloud services. Every short story, every essay, every poem I'd written since high school. I created a digital paper trail that would be impossible to erase, complete with timestamps. Then I documented everything. I created a private Google Doc and started writing down every memory I had of financial manipulation, every conversation, every broken promise. The $10,000 loan that had paid for Emma's yacht party, the college fund my grandmother had left me that I'd never seen a penny of, which my parents claimed had been used for family expenses, but which I strongly suspected had been spent on Emma's portfolio photos. The rent I'd paid for 7 years that had supposedly gone into a household savings account I'd never been able to verify existed. My email pinged. Catherine Chen had written back, "Isabel, I can't believe I'm hearing from you. I've thought about reaching out so many times over the years, but didn't want to cause problems. Your father and I haven't spoken since your grandmother's funeral in 1994. I'd love to connect. Are you free for a phone call?" I checked my watch. My family's flight had been in the air for 2 hours. They wouldn't land in Paris for another 5.5 hours. I had time. I called Catherine from the business center's private phone booth. "Isabel?" Her voice was warm, slightly husky, unmistakably similar to my father's in tone. "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." "Hi, Aunt Catherine." The title felt strange on my tongue. I know this is out of the blue. I found you through the DNA site, and I had some questions about the family. Ask me anything, sweetheart. Though I'll warn you, the answers might not be what your father told you. Over the next 90 minutes, Catherine unraveled everything I thought I knew about my family history. My grandmother, Catherine and David's mother, had been a successful real estate developer in Manhattan. When she died, she'd left her estate split evenly between her 2 children, Catherine and David, approximately $1.8 million each, plus a brownstone in Brooklyn that was to be split or sold. David had wanted to sell immediately. Catherine had wanted to keep the brownstone and buy out David's half as she was planning to move back to New York from San Francisco with her family. They'd argued. David had produced a last-minute revised will that left him the entire estate, claiming their mother had changed her mind in her final weeks and wanted everything to go to her son. Catherine had hired lawyers. The will was obviously forged, different paper stock, different notary than the lawyer who'd handled all of grandmother's affairs. But David had already sold the brownstone and moved the money into accounts Catherine couldn't trace. The legal battle would have cost more than Catherine could afford, dragging on for years. So she'd walked away, cut contact with her brother, and tried to build a life without that inheritance. Your father was always the golden child, Catherine said, her voice heavy with old grief. Your grandmother loved us both, but David, he was special to her in a way I never was. So when he produced that will, some people believed him. Thought maybe she really had changed her mind. But she hadn't. No, sweetheart, she hadn't. The lawyer who'd worked with her for 30 years testified that she'd never intended to disinherit me. But David was very convincing, very charming, and he had Margaret backing him up, crying about how they needed the money for their new baby. That was you, by the way. My stomach turned. He used me as justification to steal from you. I don't blame you for his choices, Isabel. You were an infant. But yes, he claimed he needed the money to provide for his daughter. She paused. How has he provided for you, if you don't mind me asking? I laughed, brittle and sharp. He hasn't. I've been paying my own way since I was 12. The silence on the other end was heavy. Catherine, Aunt Catherine, can I ask you something? That money from the estate, is there any chance legally that the case could be reopened? After this long, I doubt it. Why? Because I think I can prove he's still forging documents for financial gain. And if I can prove a pattern of fraud, I explained about the college fund, the missing rent money, the loan that became Emma's party. Catherine listened, and I could hear her breathing shift. Do you have documentation? Some, but I'm going to get more. Isabel, be careful. Your father doesn't react well when cornered. I know, I said, thinking of 1,000 small cruelties, 1,000 moments of emotional manipulation. That's why I'm not going to corner him. I'm going to dismantle his whole world piece by piece. And then I'm going to walk away and never look back. You sound like you've got a plan. I do, and it starts with me not going to Paris. I left the airport around 9 p.m., took the subway back to Manhattan, and let myself into the empty apartment. My family wouldn't be back for 12 days. I had 12 days of solitude, 12 days of freedom, and 12 days to execute phase 1 of my plan. The first thing I did was search Emma's room. The first time around, I'd respected her privacy, never entering without permission. Now, I photographed everything. I found my stolen laptop exactly where I remembered it would be, in the back of her closet. I took it, backed up her browser history and files, which confirmed she was planning to steal my stories. They were bookmarked in a folder labeled Content Ideas, and returned it to its hiding spot. In her desk drawer, I found a ledger. Emma, for all her social media savvy, kept physical records of her business expenses. Except these weren't business expenses. They were personal purchases she was claiming as tax-deductible business costs. Designer bags listed as props for shoots, vacations listed as brand research, the yacht party listed as a promotional event despite being a private birthday celebration. I photographed every page. In my parents' bedroom, I found more. Bank statements showing the household savings account I'd supposedly been paying into, except it had a balance of only $800, despite my having paid $650 a month in rent for 7 years. That was over $54,000 unaccounted for. I found the statements from my grandmother's trust that had been used for family expenses, $75,000 that had been deposited into my father's account when I was 18 and withdrawn in increments that corresponded exactly with Emma's modeling expenses, portfolio shoots, agency fees, her private school tuition. My inheritance had paid for Emma's career. I photographed everything, backed it up to the cloud, and then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Over the next 3 days, I worked methodically through the apartment. I found Emma's journal. She was shockingly indiscreet, where she'd written things like, Mom agreed I should have Iz's room by next year. Just need to convince Dad. Iz is so pathetic. She'll never leave on her own. I found emails on my father's computer, password, Emma's birthday, naturally, discussing how to manage Isabel's expectations about family money and how to keep me invested in the family dynamic. So I'd continue to provide free labor. I found texts between my mother and Emma planning the Paris trip, including this exchange. Emma, Should we actually wait for Iz at the airport? Mom, no. She needs to learn the world doesn't revolve around her schedule. Besides, it'll be nice to have the first few days without her energy dragging us down. Emma, LOL true, she's so depressing. They'd planned to leave me. It wasn't forgetfulness or a difficult decision made in the moment. They'd planned it. I sat on the floor of my parents' bedroom at 2 a.m., looking at that text chain, and felt something cold and clean settle in my chest where the desperate need for their love used to live. Good. On day 4, I called Catherine back. I have evidence of ongoing fraud, I told her. Bank records, tax fraud, misappropriation of trust funds. If you're willing to file a complaint with the state bar about your case, I can provide evidence that my father has a pattern of financial manipulation going back 30 years. Are you sure you want to do this, Isabel? He's your father. He stole my grandmother's money to fund my sister's modeling career while I wore thrift store clothes and worked 2 jobs to afford food. He's kept me trapped in this apartment paying rent that disappeared into the ether while planning to kick me out the moment I wasn't useful anymore. And he stole your inheritance and used me as justification. I took a breath. He stopped being my father a long time ago. I'm just done pretending otherwise. Then let's do this right. I have a lawyer, she's tough as nails, and she's been waiting 30 years for a chance to prove David Whitmore is a fraud. Let me connect you two. Catherine's lawyer was named Rebecca Zhang, and she was indeed tough as nails. She was also thrilled at the prospect of finally nailing my father. If we can prove a pattern of financial fraud and document manipulation, we can potentially reopen your aunt's case, Rebecca explained on our video call. More importantly, we can pursue criminal charges for the misappropriation of your trust fund. That's recent enough to be within the statute of limitations. What would that mean for him? Criminal charges for fraud, potentially jail time depending on the amounts involved. Civil penalties. He'd likely have to make restitution, though getting blood from a stone is never guaranteed. But more than the legal consequences. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. Men like your father live and die by their reputations. He works in finance, correct? Yes. Private wealth management? Then a fraud conviction would end his career. He'd be unemployable in the industry. And given what you've told me about the family dynamics, if the money goes away, the family falls apart, I finished. Emma's influencer career depends on maintaining an expensive lifestyle. My mother's entire identity is wrapped up in managing that image. If they don't have money... Exactly. So we're not just talking about legal consequences. We're talking about dismantling the entire structure that's allowed them to exploit you for your entire life. I smiled. When do we start? Over the next week, I worked with Rebecca to build an airtight case. I provided her with every photograph, every document, every piece of evidence I'd collected. She was particularly interested in the tax fraud. Apparently, Emma's business expense claims were egregious enough to warrant IRS attention, and Rebecca had connections. I also spent that week quietly preparing for my exit. I interviewed with the Boston company, a video interview since I told them I was traveling, and they offered me the managing editor position on the spot. Starting salary, $105,000, plus relocation assistance and a signing bonus. 3 times what I was making now. I accepted immediately and gave notice to my current company, effective in 3 weeks. I found an apartment in Boston's North End, a gorgeous 1-bedroom with exposed brick and large windows, nothing like the cramped cell I'd been living in. I put down a deposit using money from my savings account that, for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to drain for a family emergency. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution and transferred most of my savings, leaving only enough in the old account to cover my bills until I left. I changed my phone plan to an individual account instead of the family plan. I updated all my passwords. I filled out a change of address form with the post office, effective in 3 weeks. And I packed. Not everything. I didn't want them to notice when they returned. Just the things that mattered. My photos, my books, my grandmother's jewelry that I'd hidden in my room, the jewelry they didn't know I had, that she'd given me secretly before she died, as if she'd known what would happen. I shipped it all to Catherine's address in San Francisco for safekeeping until I could collect it. On the 11th day, I met with Rebecca one final time before my family returned. "We're ready to file," she said. "I have enough evidence to pursue charges for your trust fund misappropriation, and I've flagged the tax issues to the appropriate authorities. Catherine has agreed to file a complaint about the estate case, and with your new evidence of ongoing fraud, there's a real chance we can reopen it." "How long until things start happening?" "I'll file the paperwork on Monday. Your father will likely be contacted within the week for questioning. The IRS moves slower, but once they start auditing, they're thorough. I'd estimate within a month your family is going to be drowning in legal problems. And they'll know it came from me." "Probably. Will you be safe?" I thought about the apartment I'd already rented, the job I'd already accepted, the new life I'd already built in my mind. "I won't be here for them to find." Rebecca nodded approvingly. "Smart girl. One more thing. I've prepared a cease and desist letter regarding your stolen writing. Emma published it under her own name, which is copyright infringement. If she doesn't take it down and issue a public apology within 30 days, we'll pursue legal action." "She won't apologize." "I know, but the lawsuit will be fun." On day 12, I deep cleaned the apartment, replaced everything I'd moved, and took one last look at the home I'd grown up in. The home where I'd never been welcome, never been valued, never been seen. Then I went to my room, packed a single suitcase with everything I needed for the next few weeks, and left to stay in a hotel. I'd return in 3 weeks to get the last of my things, but I wasn't going to be here when they got home. I wasn't going to wait for their excuses, their gaslighting, their tears and manipulation. I was done. My phone started ringing at 6 p.m. that night. They must have landed and gotten through customs. I silenced it and went to dinner at a nice restaurant near my hotel, ordered a bottle of wine, and toasted myself. By the time I got back to my room, I had 43 missed calls and 62 text messages. I read through them while drinking hotel-provided champagne. "Mom, where are you? We're home and the apartment is empty." "Dad, Isabel, this isn't funny. Call us immediately." "Emma, WTF did you seriously move out while we were gone?" So dramatic. "Marcus, hey sis, everyone's freaking out. You okay?" Marcus, the only message that seemed like it came from actual concern rather than anger at my inconvenience to them. I called him back. Jesus, everyone's going crazy. Where are you?" "I'm fine, Marcus. I'm in a hotel." "Why didn't you go to Paris? And why did you move out? Mom is losing her mind." "Did she tell you why I didn't go to Paris?" Silence. "Did she tell you that my flight left on time, but I was stuck in security through no fault of my own, and I begged them to wait 10 minutes and they left anyway?" More silence. "They left me at the airport, Marcus, on purpose. I saw the texts between Mom and Emma planning it." "Fuck." His voice was soft. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't. You're not like them. Are you coming back?" "No, I got a new job in Boston. I'm leaving in 3 weeks." "Does Dad know?" "He will soon, along with a lot of other things." I could hear voices in the background, my mother shrieking something about me being selfish. "I have to go," Marcus said. "But I'm glad you got out. You deserve better than this." "Thanks, Marcus. You can visit me in Boston whenever you want. You'll always be welcome." I hung up and turned my phone off. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. I went to work, smiled at my colleagues, accepted their congratulations on my new position, and told no one about the storm I'd unleashed. Rebecca filed the complaints. My father was contacted by the state bar for questioning about the estate fraud. The IRS showed up at the apartment. Emma's Instagram provided them with plenty of evidence of tax fraud. My father received a subpoena for bank records related to my trust fund. I know this because Marcus kept me updated via email. He'd always been the least invested in the family drama, and I think watching it all implode gave him permission to step back and observe rather than participate. Email from Marcus, day 3. Dad's freaking out. Some lawyer contacted him about Aunt Catherine. I didn't even know we had an Aunt Catherine. Also, the IRS is auditing Emma and she's having a meltdown. Is this you? My response? Yes. This is me. Marcus, day 5. Mom asked me if I knew where you were. I said no. She tried to get into your bank account, but you changed all the passwords. Dad's been on the phone with lawyers for 2 days straight. What did you find? My response? Everything. I found everything. Marcus, day 10. Emma's Instagram got flagged for fraud. Something about sponsored posts that weren't disclosed properly. Her management company dropped her. She's blaming you, but can't figure out how you'd know about any of this. Dad got fired. His company said they can't employ someone under investigation for financial fraud. My response? Good. Marcus, day 15. Mom's crying a lot. Dad's angry all the time. They want your new address. I told them I don't have it. They're talking about suing you for defamation. Their lawyer apparently told them they don't have a case, but Dad's insisting. Is this really necessary? My response, Marcus, they stole $75,000 from my inheritance to pay for Emma's modeling career while I worked 2 jobs to afford food. They kept $54,000 of my rent money and planned to kick me out. They left me at an airport on purpose to teach me a lesson. Yes, this is necessary. This is justice. Marcus, day 15, 2 hours later. You're right. I'm sorry. I love you, sis. On day 18, my mother found my hotel and showed up in the lobby. Hotel security called my room. Ms. Whitmore, there's a woman here claiming to be your mother. She's quite insistent. Tell her I'm not available. She says she'll wait. Then call the police and have her removed for trespassing. They did. Marcus sent me a video he'd apparently recorded of her returning home, ranting about how I'd had her arrested, how I was destroying the family. How could I be so ungrateful after everything they'd sacrificed for me? I watched it once, felt nothing, and deleted it. On moving day, I hired professional movers and had them meet me at the apartment at 9 a.m. I'd timed it for when I knew Emma had a brunch commitment and my parents had a meeting with their lawyers. Marcus had helpfully provided their schedules, but of course, they'd all stayed home. I walked into the apartment with 3 burly movers behind me and found my entire family waiting in the living room like an intervention setup. Isabel, my father stood, his face haggard. He'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. We need to talk. No, we don't. I'm here to get my things and then I'm leaving. You're destroying this family, my mother said, her voice shrill. Do you understand what you've done? Your father lost his job. Emma lost her management deal. We could lose the apartment. Good, I said calmly, You all deserve it. Emma stood up, her phone in her hand, recording. You're insane. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're punishing the whole family because you're bitter and pathetic. I looked at her phone, then at her face. Post that video, Emma, please. It'll be great evidence for the lawsuit my lawyer is filing against you for stealing my writing. Also, your tax fraud investigation is based on your own Instagram posts, so keep filming yourself admitting to things. The IRS loves that. Her face went white. You had no right to go through our private documents, my father said, his voice hardening. What you did was illegal. I lived here. I paid rent. Rent that you stole, by the way. I had every right to access shared spaces. And everything I found in plain sight. Your own insurance fraud, your own forged documents, your own theft from your sister and your daughter. I smiled. You really should have been more careful about where you left evidence of your crimes, Dad. Isabel, please. My mother's voice shifted, turning pleading. We can fix this. We can be a real family. We made mistakes, yes, but you left me at an airport, on purpose. After I paid $3,000 to be included in your family vacation. I kept my voice level, factual. You texted each other about how relieved you were that I wasn't there. You spent 30 years treating me like an ATM and a maid. You stole from me, lied to me, and planned to kick me out the moment I stopped being useful. That's not a family making mistakes. That's abuse. We gave you everything, my mother shrieked. You gave me nothing. I earned everything I have despite you, not because of you, and now I'm leaving and you're never going to see me again." The movers, who had been standing awkwardly by the door, sprang into action. They'd been briefed on the situation and worked with impressive efficiency, clearing my room in under an hour, while my family watched in silence. As we loaded the last box, my father tried one final manipulation. "If you do this, you're not our daughter anymore. We'll cut you out of the will. You'll have nothing from us." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Dad, you have nothing to give. In 6 months, you'll be lucky if you're not in prison. And even if by some miracle you retain any assets, I don't want them. I don't want anything that came from you. I just want you to live the rest of your lives knowing that the daughter you threw away was the only one with any real worth, and you destroyed your entire world because you were too stupid and too cruel to see it." I walked to the door, then turned back. "By the way, Marcus, my new address is in the email I sent you this morning. You're welcome to visit anytime. The rest of you, lose my number. If you try to contact me, I'll get a restraining order." Emma made one last attempt at control. "You'll be back. You always come back. You need us." I met her eyes, those beautiful blue eyes that had gotten her everything she ever wanted without having to work for any of it. "No, Emma, you needed me. You just didn't realize it until I was gone." Boston was a revelation. My apartment was beautiful, sunlight streaming through large windows, exposed brick walls, a kitchen that was actually mine. I decorated it exactly how I wanted it. Bookshelves covering an entire wall, a reading nook by the window, art that I chose myself. My job was incredible. The publishing company was prestigious, my colleagues were talented and respectful, and for the first time in my life, my work was appreciated. Within 3 months, I'd been given a raise and my own team. Within 6 months, I was being headhunted by even bigger publishers. I made friends, real friends. People who wanted to spend time with me because they liked me, not because they needed something from me. I went to therapy, unpacked 30 years of abuse and manipulation, learned to set boundaries, learned that I was allowed to take up space and ask for things and expect to be treated with basic human dignity. I started writing again. Not for Emma's blog, not hidden in secret. Files for myself. I finished a novel, then another. I found an agent who loved my work. My first book sold at auction to a major publisher for 6 figures, and I did all of it without my family. Catherine and I became close. She flew to Boston to visit, and I flew to San Francisco to meet her family. My cousin Julia, who was brilliant and kind, and her husband Chen, who was a fantastic cook. They welcomed me like I'd always been part of their lives. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," Catherine told me one night over dinner. "She always knew you were special. She just didn't live long enough to protect you from your father." "She tried, though," I said, touching the necklace I wore, the one she'd given me secretly before she died. "She left me this. She told me to keep it hidden, that it was just for me. I think she knew what they were like." "She did. And she'd be glad you got away." Marcus visited occasionally. He'd moved out of my parents' apartment, gotten his own place, and was working on actually figuring out his life. He was never going to be someone I was close to. He'd been complicit in too many years of mistreatment, even if it was passive. But we had a cordial relationship. He kept me updated on the family implosion, which I appreciated from a distance. The updates were satisfying. 6 months after I left, my father pleaded guilty to fraud charges related to my trust fund and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. He also had to pay restitution, $75,000 plus interest. He'd never manage it. 8 months after I left, Catherine's case was reopened. The forged will was definitively proven to be fraudulent, and my father was ordered to pay her $1.8 million plus 30 years of interest and penalties. The total came to over $4 million. He declared bankruptcy. 10 months after I left, Emma's tax fraud case resulted in massive fines and penalties. She lost her remaining sponsorships, her apartment, and her credibility. She tried to start a YouTube channel documenting her fall from grace and positioning herself as a victim of a corrupt system, but the comments were brutal. Turns out, admitting on camera that you committed tax fraud doesn't generate sympathy. 1 year after I left, my parents were divorced. My mother moved in with Emma in a two-bedroom apartment in Queens. Emma got a job at a department store. My mother, who hadn't worked in 25 years, couldn't find employment. They tried to reach out occasionally, emails asking for money, for help, for forgiveness. I blocked every attempt. The cease and desist letter regarding my stolen writing resulted in a lawsuit when Emma refused to comply. She eventually settled, issuing a public apology and taking down all my work from her blog. She also had to pay my legal fees and damages, $50,000 she definitely didn't have. Her bankruptcy filing was a matter of public record 2 years after I left them at the airport terminal, or rather, after they left me. I was flying back to Boston from a writers' conference in London. I'd given a keynote speech about resilience and the writing life. My second novel had just hit the New York Times bestseller list. I'd gotten engaged to Alex, a software engineer I'd met at a bookstore who thought I was brilliant and funny and treated me like I was precious. Life was absurdly good. I was flying first class, a splurge ice, but I'd earned it. Champagne before takeoff, a seat that reclined into a bed, space to work and think and breathe. As I settled into my seat, I noticed a commotion in the economy section. A woman was arguing with a flight attendant, her voice carrying through the cabin. "I don't understand why I can't upgrade. I have a medical condition. I need more space." I knew that voice. My mother. Our eyes met across the cabin. Her face was older, harder, worn down by 2 years of consequences. She looked at me in my first-class seat, at my designer clothes, at the engagement ring on my finger. Recognition and hatred flashed across her face. She started moving down the aisle toward me. The flight attendant tried to stop her, but she pushed past. Isabel, you have to help me. You have money now. I saw your book deal in the news. You can afford to pay for my ticket upgrade. Please, honey, I'm your mother." Security was already moving toward us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no guilt, no lingering hurt, just nothing. "I don't know you," I said calmly. "Bahananis. You must have me confused with someone else." "What? Isabel, don't do this, please. I'm sorry about what happened. We made mistakes, but we're family, baba." "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat," the flight attendant said firmly, joined by 2 security officers. "My daughter is sitting right here. Tell them, Isabel." I looked at the flight attendant. I've never seen this woman before in my life. They escorted her back to her seat. I could hear her crying, protesting. I put in my headphones, accepted another glass of champagne from the flight attendant, and opened my laptop to work on my third novel. Hours later, somewhere over the Atlantic, I glanced back at economy. My mother was asleep in a middle seat, her face pressed against the window, looking small and defeated. I felt a flicker of something, not pity exactly, but acknowledgement. She'd made her choices. She'd chosen cruelty, chosen favoritism, chosen greed. She'd chosen to destroy her relationship with her daughter in 1,000 small ways over 30 years, and one catastrophic way in an airport terminal. And I'd chosen to save myself. I turned back to my laptop, to the story I was writing about a woman who burned down her old life and built a new one from the ashes, and I smiled. The flight attendant came by. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Whitmore?" "No," I said, looking out at the clouds below us, at the vast space between my old life and my new. "One, I have everything I need. 5 years after Rebirth, which was also the amount of time I'd lived in my first life before dying, I was 33 again, the age I'd been when an aneurysm had ended my first attempt at life. I'd spent those 5 years living fully in a way I'd never managed before. I'd published 4 novels, all bestsellers. I'd married Alex in a beautiful ceremony in San Francisco, surrounded by Catherine's family and my real friends. We'd bought a brownstone in Boston, ironically in the same neighborhood where my grandmother's stolen brownstone had been. I'd built a life of my own choosing, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. On the morning of my 33rd birthday, I woke up without the sharp pain behind my eyes. No aneurysm this time, just Alex beside me, soft morning light, and a sense of peace so profound it almost hurt. We had breakfast at a cafe near our house. My phone buzzed with birthday messages. Catherine and Julia, my agent, my editor, my college roommate who'd reconnected with me after I'd moved to Boston. No messages from my parents. No messages from Emma. They'd learned finally that I meant what I said about never wanting contact. Marcus had sent a text. "Happy birthday, sis. Proud of you." I smiled and sent back a heart. "What are you thinking about?" Alex asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. Just that I'm 33, I said. This is the age I died in my first life. He knew the whole story, the rebirth, the revenge, all of it. He'd listened without judgment when I'd finally told him, late one night, about the impossible truth of my second chance. And now, he asked. Now I'm alive, I said simply, really alive, for the first time. That afternoon, Catherine called. Have you seen the news? She asked without preamble. What news? Your father's out of prison. He did 14 months with time off for good behavior. I felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, nothing. Okay, I said, Maesis. Isabel, he's been making noise about trying to contact you. He's apparently found religion in prison and wants to make amends. Then he can start by leaving me alone. That would be an excellent amends. I just wanted you to know, in case he shows up. If he shows up, I'll have him arrested for violating the restraining order I filed 4 years ago. Catherine, I appreciate the heads up, but he can't hurt me anymore. None of them can. You sound very certain of that. I am. I didn't survive death and rebuild my entire life just to let them drag me back into their dysfunction. They're strangers to me now, and I'm a stranger to them. A stranger they underestimated and threw away, and they'll spend the rest of their lives regretting it. I paused, looking out the window of my beautiful home at the life I'd built. Actually, no, I hope they don't spend their lives regretting it. I hope they move on and find some kind of peace, but they'll do it without me. I'm done being part of their story. Good, Catherine said warmly. You deserve to be the protagonist of your own story, sweetheart, not a supporting character in theirs. That night, Alex and I had dinner with friends. We laughed, drank good wine, made plans for a vacation to Italy. I was working on my 5th novel, a thriller about a woman who fakes her own death to escape her family. Art imitating life, imitating art. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Please, Isabel. I know I don't deserve to talk to you, but I'm out now and I'm different. I've changed. Can we please talk? I'm your father. I love you. Dad. I showed Alex the message. What do you think I should do? What do you want to do? I thought about it. Thought about the man who'd stolen from his sister, from his daughter. The man who'd facilitated 30 years of abuse, who'd left me at an airport, who'd told me I was nothing. I thought about the life I'd built without him, and I blocked the number without responding. Done, I said, setting my phone down. He had 30 years to love me. He doesn't get to now that it's convenient for him. Alex kissed my forehead. I'm proud of you. Me too, I said, and meant it. 10 years after Rebirth, I was sitting in a bookstore in Seattle, signing copies of my 8th novel. It had debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and was being adapted for television. I'd gone from invisible daughter to successful author, and every day I woke up grateful for the second chance I'd been given. A woman approached my signing table with a book, and I looked up with my practiced smile. It was Emma. She looked different, older, tired, less polished. Her signature blonde hair was darker, poorly dyed. She wore clothes that were nice but not designer. She looked ordinary. Hi, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me. I recognize you, I said evenly. Would you like this personalized? She looked surprised that I was willing to sign it all. Could you sign it to Emma? I wrote, to Emma, may you find what you're looking for. Isabel Whitmore. I handed it back to her. She looked at the inscription, and her eyes filled with tears. I've read all your books, she said. They're really good. You were always talented. I'm sorry Her voice broke. I'm sorry for everything. I could have said many things. I could have told her that sorry wasn't enough, that she'd destroyed my childhood, that she'd been complicit in decades of abuse. I could have told her about the panic attacks I'd had in my first year of therapy, about the nightmares, about the years of damage I'd had to undo. But I was tired, and she looked tired, and there was no point. I accept your apology, I said. I hope you're doing well. I'm getting by, working as an assistant at a marketing firm, got married. He's nice. We're okay, she paused. Mom talks about you, sometimes. She's working at a library now. She's calmer. Dad's not doing well. He's living in a facility, early onset dementia. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sadness, if I let it be. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. He talks about you sometimes. In his lucid moments, he says he wishes he'd been a better father. Tell him I hope he finds peace, Nona said. But Emma, I need you to understand something. I forgive all of you. I've done the work to let go of the anger. But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. I'm not coming back. I'm not interested in rebuilding relationships with any of you. You're not my family anymore. I understand, she said, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted you to know that I know how badly we screwed up. And I'm proud of you. For getting out. For building this. She gestured to the bookstore, the line of readers waiting, the life I'd made. You were always stronger than any of us. I wasn't strong, I said quietly. I was desperate. But I learned to be strong, and yes, I built this without any of you. She nodded, clutching the book to her chest, and walked away. I watched her go and felt relief. Not triumph, not vindication, just relief. She'd said what she needed to say. I'd responded with kindness but firmness. The door was closed, locked, and I had no intention of opening it ever again. The next person in line stepped forward, a young woman, maybe 22, with nervous energy. I just want to say, she started, your books helped me leave my toxic family. Reading about your protagonist's journey to independence made me realize I could do it too. So, thank you. You probably saved my life. I smiled at her, genuinely smiled. That means everything to me. I'm so proud of you for saving yourself. This was why I'd been given a second chance. Not for revenge, that had been necessary, but it wasn't the point. The point was to live fully, to create beauty from pain, to show other people that escape was possible. The point was to fly first class, literally and metaphorically, and never look back. 20 years after Rebirth, I was 48 years old. I'd published 14 novels, won major literary awards, and adapted 3 of my books into successful TV series. Alex and I had celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary by buying a villa in Tuscany. We split our time between Boston, San Francisco, near Catherine's family, and Italy. I'd built multiple lives' worth of accomplishments into this single second chance. Catherine had passed away the year before, peacefully in her sleep at 72. I'd given the eulogy at her funeral, talking about the aunt I'd never known as a child but who'd become the family I'd chosen as an adult. Her daughter Julia was now one of my closest friends. I hadn't heard from Emma or my mother in over a decade. Marcus still sent the occasional email. He'd gotten married, had kids, seemed to have built a decent life. We were friendly, but distant. He'd never apologized for the years of passive complicity, and I'd never asked him to. Some relationships simply ran their course. My father had died in the nursing home 5 years after Emma visited my signing. Dementia had taken him slowly. Marcus had asked if I wanted to attend the funeral. I'd sent flowers and a card that said, "May he find the peace in death that eluded him in life." I didn't attend. One evening, sitting on the terrace of our Tuscan villa, watching the sunset paint the hills gold, Alex asked me something he'd never asked before. "Do you ever regret it? The way you burned it all down?" I considered the question seriously. Did I regret exposing my father's fraud, bankrupting my family, cutting them out of my life completely? No, I said finally, not even a little. They weren't family. They were people who shared my DNA and used that biological connection to exploit me for 30 years. Real family doesn't do that. Real family looks like you, like Catherine and Julia, like the friends we've made. Real family is chosen. and it's built on mutual respect and genuine love. Not revenge, he teased gently. The revenge was satisfying, I admitted with a smile. But it wasn't the point. The point was freedom. The revenge was just clearing the debris so I could build something real. And did you? Build something real? I looked at him, this man who'd loved me with steadiness and joy for 20 years. I thought about my books, my legacy, the readers who'd told me my stories had helped them escape their own toxic situations. I thought about the life I'd built from nothing but determination and a second chance. Yes, I said. I built something real, something that's entirely mine, something they can never touch or taint or take away. Good, he said, and kissed me as the sun set on another perfect day. I lived to be 93 in my second life, 65 years in this timeline, 93 years total if you counted both lives. I'd outlived everyone from my original family. I'd built a legacy that would endure long after I was gone. On my final day, surrounded by Alex, now 94 but still sharp as ever, Julia and her children and grandchildren, and a collection of friends who'd become family, I felt nothing but peace. My last thought before I closed my eyes was not of the family that had broken me, but of the moment in the airport terminal when I'd made the choice to save myself. The moment I'd decided that being abandoned was actually a gift, the final push I'd needed to fly, and I'd been flying first class ever since.